The night was still when Officer Ryan Cooper stepped into the small diner. Neon lights shimmered on the glass, the smell of coffee hanging in the air. At a corner table, an elderly couple sat in silence. 2 cold cups of tea, 1 unpaid bill, and a quiet kind of shame. Without a word, Ryan placed a few bills on the counter and slid his meal toward them. "Dinner's on me," he said softly. He didn't know then. They weren't struggling. They were watching, testing the kind of man he truly was. And that one small act of kindness would change everything that followed. Subscribe if you believe a single act of kindness can rewrite an entire life. The evening light drifted gently through the trees along Main Street. The air was soft and still, the kind of calm that makes small towns like Brookdale feel like time has chosen to slow down for them. Ryan Cooper parked the patrol car beside a row of mailboxes, the engine ticking as it cooled. He was 39, tall, built from years of duty and quiet endurance. His navy short-sleeve police shirt was slightly wrinkled, the nameplate R. Cooper dulled by dust. His skin carried the color of the sun, and his voice, when he finally spoke, held the weight of someone who had seen too much but still chose kindness. Max, his German shepherd, sat alert in the passenger seat, brown-black fur glowing under the fading sunlight. The dog turned his head toward him, as if asking what came next. Ryan smiled faintly. "Just one more stop, buddy." He stepped out and walked toward a small house painted pale yellow, its porch crowded with potted plants and a rusty tricycle. Adam Reed, a thin 10-year-old boy with freckles, ran to meet him. The boy's t-shirt was worn, his sneakers untied. Ryan handed him a small knitted cap, faded but clean. "Found this in the park," he said. Adam grinned and pulled it over his head. "Will you come to the Christmas party, Officer Ryan?" Ryan chuckled softly. "Only if Max promises not to eat all your cookies." The boy's laughter echoed down the empty street. It was a sound Ryan hadn't heard in a long time. Pure, bright, untouched by regret. Back in the car, he sat for a moment, watching the boy wave from the porch. The sun was sinking behind the roofs, turning the air gold. Ryan took a deep breath, his chest tightening with that quiet ache of men who give more than they keep. Max rested his head on Ryan's arm, tail thumping softly. "Yeah," Ryan murmured. "I know. Time for dinner." He drove toward the center of town, windows rolled down, letting the mild air wash away the scent of asphalt and duty. 3 days of double shifts, of cold coffee and late reports, had hollowed him out. His stomach reminded him that he hadn't eaten a proper meal since Tuesday. When the warm glow of Martha's Diner came into view, its neon sign flickering against the dusk, he slowed. The place was small, humble, familiar, the kind of diner where you could still find kindness, served with black coffee. Ryan parked, unbuckled, and looked at Max. "Let's get something decent tonight, partner." Max's ears perked, eyes bright. The door chime rang as they stepped inside, and the soft hum of conversation welcomed them. Ryan didn't know it yet, but that simple decision, to stop, to rest, to share one quiet meal, was about to change everything he thought he understood about purpose, loyalty, and the quiet ways love finds its way back to a man's life. The evening sun leaned low over Brookdale, brushing gold on the diner's windows. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and grilled bread, the kind of scent that carries both comfort and fatigue. At the far table sat Edward and Susan Blake, an elderly couple who looked as if the world had slowed down just for them. Edward, around 70, wore a pale gray shirt tucked neatly into khaki pants. His hands, though steady, carried the tremor of time. Susan, slender, her silver hair tied into a soft knot, wore a beige dress and a light cream blouse that matched the calm tone of her eyes. Between them lay 2 cups of coffee, both long cold. Their quiet glances spoke more than words, an old rhythm of shared endurance, of love held together by patience. Susan searched her purse, frowning. Edward sighed, tapping his wallet, finding nothing. The waitress, young and nervous, shifted her weight, unsure what to say. The moment stretched, fragile and exposed. The doorbell chimed softly. Ryan Cooper stepped in, the air from outside following him like a tired breath. His shirt clung slightly to his back, traces of a long day visible in the dust on his boots. Max, the German shepherd, padded beside him, tail low but eyes bright. Ryan nodded to the waitress, choosing a corner seat. He wanted quiet, a meal without thought. Yet his gaze caught the old couple by the window, their silence heavy. The waitress still waiting for an answer. Something in the stillness pulled at him. He remembered the nights he'd watched his parents struggle the same way, proud faces hiding the ache of not enough. He stood, took his wallet, and walked toward the counter. "It's all right," he said softly, placing a few bills on the table. "Dinner's on me tonight?" The words hung there, simple, unpolished, but warm. Edward blinked in surprise. Susan covered her mouth, her eyes glassy. The waitress whispered, "Thank you, officer." Max sat beside him, patient, gaze steady. For a moment, the diner seemed to breathe again. Plates clinked, the ceiling fan hummed. Life continued. But for Ryan, something subtle shifted inside, like a knot loosening. He returned to his seat, the burger untouched for a while. Outside, the light was fading into amber, stretching long shadows across the street. The couple waved as they left, still holding hands. Ryan nodded back with a faint smile, not expecting to see them again. Yet deep down, there was a feeling, one that came to men who have lost and learned to give anyway. A quiet knowing that kindness, once set loose, always finds its way back. Rain had fallen briefly, leaving the streets of Brookdale glistening beneath the last light of dusk. The world seemed washed clean, the air scented faintly with asphalt and lilac from the gardens nearby. Ryan Cooper stepped out of Martha's diner with the quiet fatigue of a man who had carried too many nights alone. His shirt clung slightly to his shoulders. A stain of coffee lingered on his sleeve. He didn't notice. Max, loyal as ever, trotted beside him, the leash slack. The dog stopped for a moment, lifting his head toward the breeze as if reading something in the air that Ryan could not. Behind them, laughter trickled faintly from inside the diner, but Ryan's thoughts were far away. He hadn't done anything special, just paid for someone's dinner. The world didn't change because of gestures like that, he told himself, but something softer in him, perhaps the part that still remembered his father's quiet generosity, felt lighter. Across the street, a black Bentley idled beneath a flickering street lamp. Edward Blake sat in the back seat, his fingers folded, the lines on his face drawn with age and knowing. Beside him, Susan Blake turned, her hand resting on his arm. She had changed from her modest beige dress into a soft cardigan, her eyes distant yet gentle. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with doubt. Edward nodded slowly. A man like that doesn't act for show. He looked down at a folder on his lap, embossed in gold. Blake Foundation, Character Evaluation Program. A single name had just been written inside, Ryan Cooper. The car rolled forward, its tires whispering over the wet pavement. Susan watched Ryan through the window, the way he crouched to pat Max, the way he smiled faintly at something the dog did. She saw kindness without armor, the kind that asked for nothing in return. It was rare, she thought, and all the more beautiful because it seemed unaware of itself. Ryan didn't see them leave. He and Max stood under the faint glow of the diner sign, the hum of a distant radio drifting through the night air. Max leaned against his leg, eyes calm and trusting. Ryan rubbed the dog's head and exhaled. "Come on, partner, let's head home." He didn't know that his small act of compassion had already begun to ripple far beyond that quiet street, into lives, decisions, and hearts that would soon find their way back to him. The night was warm and still. Outside, the sound of crickets rose between the hum of passing cars. In Ryan's small apartment, a single lamp burned low, spreading a soft amber light across the desk. He sat there in his navy short-sleeve uniform, the fabric creased from the long day. The radio murmured quietly on the shelf, its voice blending with the slow rotation of the ceiling fan. Max lay sprawled on the floor beside him, one ear twitching with each faint sound from the street below. Ryan opened his wallet, thin, worn, holding little more than a few folded bills and a faded photograph of a woman smiling beneath summer light. His thumb brushed across the image, a habit he no longer questioned. 3 days' work, he murmured, and I gave it away. There was no bitterness in the words, only a tired kind of amusement. The radio crackled again, shifting tone. Budget cuts are expected to affect several police departments. K-9 units may face dissolution. Ryan froze. His eyes lifted from the wallet toward Max, who had raised his head, sensing something in the silence. The dog's coat gleamed under the dim light, brown and black interwoven like dusk and earth. Ryan smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. If they cut the program, he said softly, they'll split us up, partner. Max blinked, head tilted, as if waiting for reassurance. Ryan knelt down, resting his hand gently behind the dog's ear. Don't worry, they don't know what we've been through. They don't know you're the best thing that ever happened to me. He stood again, glancing at the clock. Past midnight. The streets outside were nearly silent, the air thick with the smell of rain from earlier. A train's horn moaned faintly somewhere beyond town, long, low, like a memory calling back from another life. Ryan stared at the window for a long time. He wasn't a man who prayed often, but in that moment, he found himself hoping, not for luck, not for mercy, but for the simple grace to keep doing what was right, even when no one noticed. Max shifted on the floor, tail thudding gently, once, twice. Ryan exhaled, turned off the radio, and leaned back in his chair. The lamp's light flickered once, before settling, and the room filled with a quiet so deep it almost sounded like peace. Outside, under the lamplight, moths circled endlessly, chasing the same warmth they could never hold. Morning came with a pale sunlight that softened the edges of Brookdale's old police station. The hallways smelled faintly of coffee and waxed floors, the kind of scent that belonged to long hours and tired men. Ryan Cooper straightened his uniform as he climbed the stairs to Captain Miller's office. He assumed this was about the K-9 budget, the looming cuts that had kept him awake most of the night. Max waited downstairs in the patrol room, tail thumping quietly against the tile floor, unaware of the storm that might separate them. Ryan's boots echoed with a hollow rhythm that matched his unease. When he reached the door marked Captain Miller, commanding officer, he took a slow breath and knocked. "Come in." The captain's voice was firm, measured, the tone of a man used to giving news that changed lives. Ryan stepped in, then froze. Seated at the round table near the window were Edward and Susan Blake, dressed with quiet grace, and a younger woman with a professional calmness about her. She wore a white blouse, gray slacks, and carried a sleek leather folder. Her hair was tied back neatly, her eyes thoughtful but kind. Captain Miller stood beside his desk, watching Ryan carefully. "Officer Cooper," he said, "you've got visitors." Edward rose, his movements deliberate but dignified. "We meet again," he said with a small smile. Ryan blinked, uncertain whether to salute or laugh. "So you did find your wallet." Edward chuckled softly. "We found something more important." The young woman opened her folder, revealing several neatly stacked documents. "I'm Laura Simmons, Field Director for the Blake Foundation." Her voice was warm, yet carried a tone of purpose. "Mr. and Mrs. Blake have been observing you for the past few days, with the department's cooperation." Ryan frowned slightly. "Observing?" Edward gestured to the papers. Every officer claims to serve the community. We wanted to see what happens when no one's watching. Laura slid the folder toward him. Inside were photos. Him stopping to fix an old man's mailbox after a storm, helping a stray dog off the road, staying after hours to train Max in the yard. We learned about your volunteer work, she continued, and the meal you gave away at Martha's diner. Ryan stared, speechless. He wasn't sure if he should feel flattered or invaded. His hand rested on the table, rough and steady. Edward's tone softened. Last night wasn't chance, Officer Cooper. It was a test, and you passed it without knowing. For a long moment, the office was silent, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Captain Miller folded his arms, half proud, half amused. Seems your reputation's caught up with you, Cooper. Ryan exhaled slowly. A test, he repeated, still unsure if this was real. Edward nodded. We've spent years looking for people who still believe in decency, not for recognition, but because it's right. You reminded us such people still exist. Laura closed the folder gently. We have an offer, she said, one that might change more than your own life. Outside, sunlight brightened the glass door, and Ryan could almost see Max's reflection waiting in the hallway, patient, loyal, unaware that everything might be about to change. Morning sunlight poured through the wide glass windows of Captain Miller's office, glinting off polished plaques and the faint dust floating in the air. The world outside went on as usual. Sirens, radios, footsteps. But inside, time seemed to pause. Laura Simmons opened the folder slowly, spreading documents across the table. Her movements were calm, precise, practiced, the grace of someone who dealt daily with impossible things and still believed they could happen. The Blake Foundation, she began, is launching a new initiative, a community K-9 rescue center. It will serve three purposes: retraining retired police dogs, offering therapy programs for veterans, and giving shelter dogs a second chance through service training. She looked up, meeting Ryan's eyes. We need someone to lead it, someone who acts out of heart, not ambition. Ryan sat very still. The sunlight caught the edge of his badge, dulling it to bronze. He wasn't used to sitting in meetings like this, where the air smelled of paper, ink, and wealth. His palms rested on his knees, the calluses rough against the fabric of his uniform. Ma'am, he said slowly, I'm not sure I'm who you think I am. I'm just a police officer. I don't run programs. I don't know anything about budgets or foundations. Edward smiled, a patient, knowing smile that came from years of watching men doubt themselves. The right man for the job never thinks he deserves it, he said. Laura turned the top page toward him. The words, initial funding, $5,000, stood in bold. Ryan blinked, thinking it must be a misprint. His throat tightened. I only gave someone a meal, he said quietly. Susan leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. And sometimes, a meal is how miracles begin. Ryan's eyes moved from the papers to the window. Down in the parking lot, Max sat waiting by the cruiser, his posture steady, ears lifted, unaware that his name, too, was written in the proposal. You'd be responsible for the center's operations, Laura continued. Recruitment, training, outreach. The goal is to restore trust between people, between service and compassion. Captain Miller leaned on the edge of his desk, studying Ryan. You've already been doing that every day, he said, just without a paycheck big enough to notice. Ryan exhaled, hands trembling slightly. The thought of leading something that mattered, something that could save both dogs and men, felt too big for the room, too good to believe. He nodded once, still looking out the window at Max. If I do this, he murmured, it's not for the money. Edward's tone was firm, gentle. Then you're already the man we hope to find. The room fell silent again, filled only with the faint hum of the air vent and the soft thump of Ryan's heartbeat in his ears. The sun reached the corner of the table, turning the folder's golden seal into a small flare of light. like the first spark of something waiting to grow. The morning light lay gently over Brookdale like a blessing. The old warehouse, once gray and forgotten, now stood reborn. White walls, clean glass, and a sign that read, Brookdale K9 Rescue Center. The smell of fresh paint mingled with spring air and cut grass. Somewhere, a wind chime clinked softly. Ryan Cooper stood at the front gate, wearing a simple shirt and the same old boots from his patrol days. Max, older but still bright-eyed, sat proudly beside him, tail sweeping the ground like a slow rhythm of contentment. The crowd gathered, neighbors, veterans, officers, and children. Balloons swayed in the breeze, ribbons gleamed under sunlight. For the first time in years, Ryan felt something quiet but steady inside him. Peace that had weight, not emptiness. When the ceremony began, Captain Miller stepped to the microphone, his voice rough but warm. "A year ago," he said, "this place was just an idea. One man, one dog, and a little faith. Today, it's proof that goodness can outlast fear." The applause was soft at first, then grew stronger. Edward and Susan Blake stood together at the back, hands clasped, their faces lit by pride more than pride's words. Laura Simmons smiled faintly, a file pressed to her chest, eyes shimmering with quiet satisfaction. She had seen projects succeed, but this one felt alive. Then Ryan took the stage. He wasn't a natural speaker. His strength had always been in doing, not talking. But the moment felt right. The microphone picked up the steady hum of his voice, low and calm. "When we started," he said, "I didn't think I could lead anything. I just wanted to do what was right, but I learned something from Max, and from all of you. Kindness doesn't need witnesses. It only needs to be real." The crowd fell silent, not because the words were grand, but because they were true. A few veterans nodded, eyes damp. Adam Reed, the boy from the neighborhood, ran up to Max, laughing as the German shepherd wagged his tail and leaned against him. Cameras clicked, children clapped, but for Ryan, the moment that mattered was the look in Max's eyes. That same trust, unbroken through every storm. Captain Miller walked over and placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "You've built more than a center, son," he said quietly. "You've built hope." Ryan smiled, eyes on the horizon where sunlight spread across the town. "Maybe that's all any of us can build," he murmured. The wind carried the ribbon high, twisting in the gold of morning. And for a fleeting second, the world felt healed, not perfect, but whole enough to believe in again. The evening air was soft, touched by the faint hum of crickets and the glow of neon lights spilling across the quiet main street of Brookdale. The sign for Martha's Diner flickered gently. The same diner, the same corner table, but time had changed everything. Ryan Cooper pushed the door open, the small bell above it chiming a note of memory. He was no longer in uniform. The navy shirt he wore bore the logo of Brookdale K9 Rescue Center. His face looked older, lines deeper, but his eyes were calmer now. Not from rest, but from peace, hard-earned. Max, grayer around the muzzle, padded in behind him, tail low and content. The waitress smiled, recognizing him. "Evening, Officer Cooper." "Just Ryan now," he said softly. "And coffee, please." As he waited, his gaze caught a family in the far booth. A man, young, perhaps 30, sat slumped, fingers pressed against an empty wallet. Across from him, a little girl, no older than 7, stirred her milkshake nervously. The mother looked at the floor, whispering something about leaving before the check came. The waitress lingered by their table, hesitant, kind but uncertain. Ryan watched the scene unfold with a quiet ache of recognition. He could almost see himself years ago, exhausted, uncertain, trying to make the right choice with almost nothing left. When the father finally stood to apologize, Ryan rose too. "No need," he said, stepping closer, his voice even. "I am the police." The words came out half jest, half truth. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, and placed them gently on the counter. "Dinner's on me." The young man looked stunned. "You don't have to." Ryan smiled. Neither did someone else once. The girl turned toward Max, her face lighting up as she reached to hug him. The old shepherd stayed perfectly still, eyes soft, leaning into the small arms around his neck. The sound of her laughter filled the diner like a hymn. Later, when the family left, Ryan stayed for a while. The night outside was quiet, and the air smelled faintly of rain on asphalt. Across the street, the sign of the rescue center glowed warm. Brookdale K-9 Rescue, where kindness leads the way. He traced the words with his eyes, thinking of every face, every small moment that had led him here. His reflection in the glass seemed older, but lighter, as if some invisible weight had finally lifted. He whispered almost to the wind, "You were right, Emily. Good still finds its way." Max looked up, ears twitching, then laid his head on Ryan's knee. The bell above the diner door chimed again, soft and familiar, and outside, the night held its breath, just long enough for peace to stay. When life feels ordinary, when no one seems to notice your efforts, remember this. Kindness is never wasted. Ryan thought he was simply paying for a meal, a simple act done without witnesses or expectations. Yet that moment became a seed, quietly growing into something greater than he could imagine. We never know who is watching, who is learning, or whose life might change because of a small decision to do good. Let your kindness stand without applause. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs hope today. May your life overflow with purpose, compassion, and quiet miracles.